Hi everybody, welcome to Mobility Monday. My name is Bart Hawkinson, physical therapist at Therapeutic Associates, Northlake Physical Therapy. Today we're going to talk about a dynamic warm-up for strength and conditioning or high-intensity exercise. So with our high-intensity exercises, super important to get the tissues really well warmed up before going into that activity. When we're talking about high intensity, we could be talking about doing stuff at the gym, we could be talking about doing CrossFit, we could be talking about doing high-intensity interval training, we could be talking about doing sports like, think flag football, think, pick up basketball games, and especially, with people, doing more and more stuff at home right now, maybe you're not able to do your normal routine, maybe gym's closed, but you're, still wanting to keep up with that. A lot of training. There's a lot of stuff out there where people are incorporating into these. So if you already have this built into your program, I don't want that to go away. This is more for people that don't have access to something like that. Maybe they're picking up their own thing, or they've picked something up from a friend or online where they want to get into doing some high intensity stuff, and they don't really have a structured warm-up plan built out. So I want this to just be a resource for that. There's lots of good ones out there. This is just an option. It's not the option, but consider it to be a good resource if you're looking to warm up for, high intensity interval, for you're doing your own CrossFit routine. You're doing some, like basketball or drills, that kind of stuff. So, what does a good warm up have into it? It should have, in my mind, three key components. So there should be a little bit of a cardio component. There should be we'll call it dynamic warm-up. So that's not the old-fashioned static stretching. It's stretching through movement. So it's dynamic stretching. And then I think that it should have a movement-specific warm-up. So an example of a movement-specific warm-up is, say that I'm going to do an interval that involves squats and pull-ups, just as an example. I would want to do something that does the squat and the pull-up movement. That would be the last thing I do. I would do my cardio, I would do my dynamic warm-up, and then I would do this movement specific, right? And it would replicate those movements, but at a low, like a lightweight, a low load, and a low intensity, right? So that's going to be really movement specific. We're not going to get into that today. We're going to focus on the other two components, the cardio component and the dynamic warm-up. So why do we warm up in the first place? Well, a few reasons. One, we want to elevate our heart rate. We want to get our heart rate up into an exercise zone. So by the time you're done with your warm-up, you should have a little bit of perspiration going, and your heart rate should be elevated a bit. Think maybe 100-ish beats per minute, maybe a little bit more than that if you're doing something high intensity. We want to warm your tissues up. Tissues that are actually warmer they're more elastic and more pliable, less likely to get injured. Right? We want to improve mobility. Similar reason is keeping things warm. The more flexibility we have as we're going into high intensity stuff, the lower the chance of injury. Think if you watched football, basketball, sports like that, the athletes warm up extensively because they get into these really extended positions. They don't want to suffer tears in those extended positions. So good, warm, pliable, mobile tissue is going to make you less likely to get injured. And then the final thing is we want to warm up our neuromuscular system. We want to warm up those connections between your nerves and the muscles to get them firing faster so they're ready to go. Most people probably have gone through this where they wake up in the morning, first thing in the morning, especially maybe if you didn't sleep super well, you're a little groggy, your coordination's not really well. Same thing's happening on our neuromuscular level. If I was to do some kind of high skill movement, even think like a pull-up or some of the weightlifting movements that are fairly skillful, and I haven't fired those muscles, it's going to be really hard to coordinate that movement and potentially lead to injury. So to recap, we're going to go through the first two pieces of what I consider a really solid warm-up. So we're going to do some simple cardio, and then we're going to go into some dynamic warm-up drills that kind of cover a lot of bases for people getting into high-intensity strength and conditioning. All right, so first component of our warm-up will be a little cardio piece, and that can just be something as simple as just doing a little run, a little jog around the block. We want to look at doing about 2 to 4 minutes on our cardio. Some other options, if you've got it available to yourself, would be to do some jump roping, just simple, nice, easy jump roping. Could do a rower if you have access to a rower, bike if you have access to a bike, or if you don't have anything, just simple jumping jacks, just nice and easy, not going real fast with those. If you're doing things that are a little bit more high intensity, jumping jacks or jumping rope, maybe doing about 2 minutes worth of that is fine. Running, biking, you probably want to do more like 4 to 5 minutes of those, just enough to where you feel like your heart rate is getting up. And with those, jumping jacks, jumping rope, it doesn't have to be straight through. You can do a few, pause for a minute, do a few more. Okay, moving on now into our dynamic warm-up. So this is going to build. So it's going to start with things that are a little bit easier and going to build into things that have a little bit more intensity. Our goal is to hit on all the major muscle groups by the time we're done. Try to do a broad range of movement, so we're working through a lot of range of motion and get the heart rate up. So we're going to start just with a simple walking knee to chest. So we do need a little bit of space. Ultimately, if you have about 20, 25 feet, that's great. If you don't, you can do smaller laps. So this is all set up to do laps down and back. If you don't have a lot of room, you can do smaller laps and just do more of them. But each movement, you should be doing, say, 30 seconds worth at least. So starting with just walking knee to chest, go down like so, just walking down knee to chest, nice and easy. That's the first one. So should be the gentlest one. So I would go down and back, getting a good, 20, 25 feet down, 20, 25 feet back. Next thing that we'll move into is a walking lunge. So coming down into a lunge there and back up. I don't have to touch my knee to the floor if that's not comfortable for me, especially it's a warm-up, so I'll start kind of easy. But key components to our walking lunge. Feet should be shoulder width apart, so I'm not doing a narrow lunge like that here. And as I go into the lunge, my weight is on my front leg here, so I'm not putting a lot of weight on the back leg. And I'm keeping my knee lined up over my foot. I'm not letting it come in. I'm not letting it collapse forward over my toes, but just nice and easy, down and back. And again, it's a warm-up, so ideally you should be able to get a little deeper into the lunge after you do a few more repetitions of it. All right. Again, pay attention. If you've got knee pain, keep them fairly shallow. Third thing we're going to move into is a lateral lunge. So similar, I'm going to step out and then drop back into the lunge there. Then I'm going to pivot and go the other direction. This warms up the hips and also creates a nice stretch through the adductor muscles. So same thing, I'd go down and back. Depending on how much space you have, you might go down all the way and back, call that good with one, or if you have a condensed space, do maybe 2 or 3 or 4 laps of them. Okay. Next movement is we're going to do a modified version of a burpee. So burpee is dropping to the floor, popping up, and then doing a jump, arms up overhead. We're not going to do the full movement. We're going to do a slower, scaled down version for a warm-up. So we'll come into down here like so. I'm not going to come all the way down to the ground. I'm just going to go here, and I'm going to pop back up, and that's it. I'm not going to do the jump, and I'm not going to drop all the way to the ground. Focusing just on the kind of intermediate middle third of the movement there, and that's it. And I would do 10 of those. Space them out accordingly. If you need to go slow with them, please do so. Okay. Following that up, we're going to move into an inchworm. So a little bit more with this one, stretching out the posterior chain a bit. So I'm going to come down, walk out, down into a push-up. And I like to add in a little stretch for my back from there. I'm going to come down there, and then I'm going to walk up into a downward dog position. I'm going to walk out, down into a push-up. I like to stretch out the lower back again, and then up into the downward dog. Out, push-up, stretch, up into downward dog. And doing about 10 repetitions of the inchworm. Okay. Then, really activating the shoulder muscles, we get into a bear crawl. So,
Here, I'm on my hands and toes, and I'm just going to try to keep the back straight. And now this isn't like
a fast bear crawl that maybe you've done in high school football at some point or something similar,
but focusing more on warming things up. So I'm moving my opposite arm and leg together, really focusing on keeping a good neutral spine,
keeping my shoulders engaged, hands directly underneath my shoulder there,
in that starting position. Okay.
And I would do a lap down and back, or if I have a small space, a few laps. Should be breathing heavy by this point. Should definitely be feeling the heart rate up. Okay. Now we're moving into a rotation stretch here. So I'm going to come out into a little bit of a lunge. I'm going to take my elbow, bring my elbow down the inside of my knee, trying to move the elbow towards the floor if I can. You'll feel it in the hip and into your torso. Then from here, I'm going to move into a rotation and then back. Okay, and then we'll switch to the other side. Knee down, or elbow down the inside of the knee, going towards the floor, and then into a rotation. So this would be done down and back. Rotation. Rotation, all the way down and back. Similar, this is for the hip flexors. So I'm going to come into a little bit of a lunge, stretching out the hip flexor there, and then going up overhead. Okay. Big lunge, and up overhead. All the way down and back again. That would look like lunge, overhead, lunge, and overhead. Okay. Now, standing in place, we're going to move into, it's called a cherry picker. So feet are a little more than shoulder width apart. I'm going to reach up overhead, and then I'm going to reach back, and I'm coming in front of my feet, directly between my feet, and then trying to get behind. Overhead, knees are soft. One, not bouncing into it, but going nice and easy. And we'll do 10 repetitions of that. Just like all of these movements, the last one should be the best one, meaning as you warm up, you should be able to get a little bit more. Okay. Similar is windmill. So if that was more just posterior chain, straight line mobility, this adds a little rotation. So let me bring my arms out. Knees are soft, feet are wide, and I'm going to try to touch my opposite foot with my hand. So I'm coming down, and so working on hinging through my hip to get there. I'm not slumping through my back. The hip is hinged, core is engaged, trying to touch the foot. Ten times to each side. Now, really starting to warm up the neuromuscular system, get a little power going. I'm going to do a lap of broad jumps. So I'm going to find that good squat position where I'm engaging my hips. So it's as if I'm sitting down into an imaginary chair behind me. Shins are vertical, knees are right over my shoelaces, and then I power forward into that jump. So I would do this as a lap. I would do broad jumps down, and then broad jumps back. Again, depending on the amount of space you have to work with, you do one big lap if you've got 20, 25 feet, or several smaller laps. So the next movement that we're going to move into is working on that explosive power on one leg. So we're going to do a bounding drill. So just think big jumps on one leg. So I'm going to jump up. Like large exaggerated running strides. It's challenging if you haven't done this before to not get into sort of a skipping rhythm. So you can start out just by doing like a run and then start to exaggerate it as you go. Sometimes that's a way to kind of help out, get that pattern down. But bounding again, big strides as you go. It's definitely easier if you've got more room to work with. The first few steps kind of have to get a little bit of movement, get a little bit of momentum before you get the movement. And then the final one is we're going to do a grapevine. One leg comes over, one leg comes behind. Working on opening the hips up all the way down and back. And trying to get a little bit of speed with that as you go. Start slow, start easy if you haven't done that one before, but once you become a little bit more proficient with it, work on increasing your speed. Again, it's much easier if you have more space to work with. All right, so today we went over a dynamic warm-up that's designed to be used for any kind of high-intensity exercise. Again, there's 3 key pieces that I personally believe are important for a good warm-up. There should be a little bit of a cardio phase to get your heart rate going. So we went over just a couple options for some cardio. Then we moved into what we call the dynamic warm-up, which is movement specific, and it starts from small and goes big. Oh shoot, I screwed up. Got to do the whole outro again. Okay. All right, so today we went over a warm-up that can be used for high-intensity strength and conditioning. Can be used for sports. And I believe, in my opinion, there's 3 key components that a good warm-up program should have. It should have a cardio warm-up phase to it, which we went over. It should have a dynamic warm-up, which focuses on improving mobility, warming tissues up for all the major muscle groups, and should be fairly total body focused. It's a little bit one size fits all. And the final piece is a movement specific warm-up, which we didn't cover, and that really is going to be based on what the activity that you're doing. So if you're going to be playing soccer, that dynamic or that movement specific warm-up piece should follow the dynamic warm-up, and it should involve some soccer drills. If it's going to be doing a weightlifting skill, then it should be doing something with a barbell, kind of stepping that movement up, starting small and moving bigger. So that's sort of outside of the scope of this, more specific on that as needed. But for your general warm-up, we kind of hit on some major movement patterns. The order of these is important, so you do want to start with kind of small, slower, simple, and get bigger and more intense as you go. And by the end, you should feel like you're a little tired, a little sweaty, your heart rate is up. And a good warm-up really should take a good 10-15 minutes. So really do budget some time for it. It really is important. All right. Definitely listen to your body with these. These are high intensity. These are challenging. Not everybody is going to want to do these. Some people are going to want to scale them back. Some people are going to want to substitute things altogether or skip some of these movements. Totally okay. It's definitely not appropriate for everybody. It's not one size fits all, although it tries to cover a lot of bases. So listen to your body, be safe, and keep moving.